The morning it all fell apart started ordinary enough, which was almost worse. Clara woke before dawn in the storage room behind the kitchen. Not a bedroom, just a space her brother Martin had decided was sufficient. A cot, a trunk, a window that didn't open. She'd stopped complaining about it years ago. Complaining required someone to listen, and Martin had made it clear she'd used up her allowances in that department. She dressed in the dark. Her clothes were clean but worn, mended in places that made the mending obvious. The dress pulled tight across her shoulders and hips. Her body had never cooperated with the silhouettes women were supposed to have. Too broad, too solid. Martin had opinions about that too, delivered with the casual cruelty of someone who believed he was being helpful. The hotel, Whitlock's Inn, though their father had been dead 6 years and Martin ran it now, sat at the edge of a town too small to have real ambitions. It served travelers who had no better options and locals who wanted somewhere to drink without their wives knowing. Clara did the work that kept it standing, the cooking, the cleaning, the laundry that never seemed to end. Martin handled the money and the public-facing parts, which meant he stood behind the desk looking important while she scrubbed floors on her hands and knees. She'd learned not to expect gratitude. She'd learned not to expect much of anything. By 6, she had the stove going and coffee brewing. The kitchen was her domain, the one place she could move without Martin's commentary tracking her every step. She cracked eggs into a bowl, her hands steady, her mind already running through the day's tasks. Breakfast for the guests, linen stripped and boiled. The dining room floor needed scrubbing. Someone had spilled beer last night and not bothered to mention it. Martin appeared around 7, hair pomaded, collar starched. He poured himself coffee without acknowledgement, the way you'd use a pump in the yard. "There's a family checking in this afternoon," he said. "Make sure their room doesn't smell like the last guy." "It won't. And we're short on bread. You'll need to bake more." "I know." He looked at her then, the way he did sometimes, assessing, calculating. "You're getting older, Clara." She said nothing. There was no safe response to that. 26 now, aren't you? 27 in December. Right. He sipped his coffee. "People talk, you know. Unmarried woman your age living here. It looks strange." Her jaw tightened. "I work here. I earn my keep." "That's not the point." He set the cup down. "The point is appearances. The point is people wonder why a woman like you hasn't—" He gestured vaguely, as if her entire existence was too tedious to articulate. "Why a woman like me hasn't what? Found someone, settled, moved on." The eggs hissed in the pan. She focused on them, flipping each one with careful precision. "And who exactly should I have found, Martin? In this town? Doing the work I do?" "Don't take that tone." "I'm not taking any tone. I'm asking a question." His face darkened. Martin didn't like questions, especially from her. "You think you're clever. You think because you read those books Father left you that you're better than—" "I don't think I'm better than anyone." "You act like it." She plated the eggs, hands trembling just slightly. "I act like someone who's tired, that's all." He stared at her, and for a moment she thought he might let it drop. Then, "Mrs. Henshaw asked about you yesterday." Clara's stomach dropped. Mrs. Henshaw was a busybody with a taste for gossip and a nephew nobody wanted to marry off. She'd been circling for months. "She thinks her nephew Thomas might be a good match. Thomas Henshaw drinks himself stupid every Saturday and hasn't held a job in 3 years. He's a man. He has prospects. He has a mother who wants him out of her house." Martin's hand slammed on the table, rattling the cups. "You don't get to be picky. Look at yourself, Clara. Look at what you are. You think you have options? You think men are lining up?" The words landed like they always did, precise, designed to hit the softest parts. She'd heard variations of this speech since she was 16. Too big, too plain, too stubborn, too much work for too little reward. She used to cry. Then she used to argue. Now she just stood there, spatula in hand, and waited for it to be over. "Mrs. Henshaw is being generous," Martin continued. "Thomas would be lucky to have you, frankly, but she's willing to overlook certain things. Certain things. Your age, your appearance, your attitude." "How kind of her." "Don't." His voice went cold. "Don't do that thing where you pretend you're above this. You're not. You're a 27-year-old unmarried woman with no money and no prospects, living in your brother's hotel because you have nowhere else to go. If someone's willing to take you on, you smile and say thank you. She turned back to the stove, throat tight. I'm not marrying Thomas Henshaw. Then who? Tell me, Clara, who's going to want you? The question hung there, ugly and familiar. She'd asked it herself, late at night in that storage room. The answer always came back the same. Nobody. Nobody wanted her. Nobody had ever wanted her. She was the extra daughter, the inconvenient one, the burden their mother had died delivering and their father had never quite known what to do with. Martin had inherited that confusion, but he'd refined it into something sharper. I'll manage on my own, she said quietly. You'll manage. He laughed, bitter. Doing what? You think you can leave here and do what exactly? Teach? Clean houses? You have no references, no connections, no... I work here. That's a reference. From your brother, who people know keeps you out of pity. That one hit harder than she'd expected. She gripped the counter, breathing carefully. Martin must have seen something in her face because he softened, just slightly. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm trying to help you see reality. You need to be practical. Thomas isn't perfect, but he's willing. That's more than most would offer. She didn't answer. Couldn't. He sighed. Think about it. Mrs. Henshaw's coming by Thursday for tea. Be presentable. He left, boots heavy on the floorboards. Clara stood in the kitchen, surrounded by the smell of eggs and coffee and her own humiliation, and tried not to shake apart. Check. The businessman arrived just before noon. Martin greeted him with the oily charm he reserved for people who might spread word about the inn. Mr. Pritchard, welcome back. Your usual room? If it's available. Of course. Clara... He snapped his fingers without looking at her. Mr. Pritchard's bags. She was carrying a basket of clean linens, arms already full, but she set it down and reached for the leather case. It was heavier than it looked. She adjusted her grip and started toward the stairs. Careful with that, Pritchard said. Not unkind, just automatic. I've got it. Halfway up, her foot caught the hem of her dress, the one that was slightly too long because she'd been too tired to hem it properly last week. She stumbled, caught herself on the railing, but the case slipped. It tumbled down 3 steps, latches popping open, papers scattering. Christ, Martin hissed. She scrambled down, cheeks burning, and started gathering the papers. I'm so sorry. Pritchard waved it off. No harm done. But Martin was already there, yanking her up by the elbow, his smile fixed in place for Pritchard while his fingers dug in hard enough to bruise. Claire's a bit clumsy. I apologize. It's fine, really. She'll be more careful. He shoved her toward the kitchen. Go help with lunch. She went, papers still clutched in her hand, Pritchard's voice behind her saying something polite and embarrassed. In the kitchen, she finally let herself breathe. Her hands were shaking. It was such a small thing, a stumble, a case, nothing broken, nothing ruined, but the shame felt enormous, swallowing her whole. She pressed her palms flat on the counter and counted to 10, then 20. Then she got back to work because what else was there? Lunch service was quiet. She served soup and bread to the guests, keeping her head down, her movements efficient. One of the men, a traveling salesman with a mustache that didn't suit him, made a joke about the soup being better than his wife's. The others laughed. Clara smiled the way she was supposed to and cleared the bowls. In the kitchen, she let the smile drop. Martin appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Henshaw's confirmed for Thursday, 4 o'clock. Wear the blue dress. I don't care what you want. You'll be there, you'll be pleasant, and you'll seriously consider what Thomas is offering. He's not offering anything. His mother's trying to pawn him off. Martin's jaw worked. You think you're too good for him. I think he's a drunk. And you're a spinster living on charity. He stepped closer. Let me be clear, Clara. If you don't start taking your future seriously, I will. You won't like the results. What's that supposed to mean? It means this arrangement, he gestured around the kitchen, isn't permanent. I've been patient. I've let you stay here long past what's reasonable, but I have plans, and they don't include carrying you forever. Her heart kicked. Plans. I'm getting married. Mary Calloway accepted last week. Mary Calloway, the banker's daughter, young, pretty, completely unsuited to running an inn, but perfectly suited to being Martin's trophy. She'll want changes, Martin continued. A real housekeeper, for one. Someone she chooses. Not family charity. Clara's mouth went dry. You're throwing me out. I'm giving you options. Marry Thomas or find somewhere else to go. You have until the end of the month. 3 weeks. She stared at him, this man who shared her blood and nothing else, and felt something cold settle in her chest. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Where am I supposed to go? That's your problem. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Clara, the blue dress, Thursday. Don't embarrass me in front of Mrs. Henshaw. Dad. She made it until evening before the weight of it crushed her. After the dinner service, after the dishes were washed and the floors were swept, she slipped out the back door into the narrow yard behind the inn. It wasn't much. A patch of dirt, a clothesline, a stack of crates. But it was outside and she needed air. The sky was deepening to purple, stars starting to prick through. She sat on one of the crates and pressed her hands to her face. 3 weeks. Marry a man who repulsed her, or be cast out with nothing. She'd known Martin was cruel, but she'd thought there were limits. She'd thought blood meant something. Apparently not. A door opened somewhere down the alley. Voices drifted over, men laughing, glasses clinking. The saloon, probably. Saturday night. The world spinning on, indifferent. She thought about leaving, just packing the few things she owned and walking away. But to where? With what? She had no money. Martin paid her nothing, room and board, he said, as if that was generous. She had no friends in town, not really. People were polite to her the way they were polite to anyone who served them food, but that wasn't friendship. She was alone. Completely, entirely alone. The realization should have terrified her. Instead, it felt almost clarifying. If she was alone anyway, what did she have to lose? Oh, Thursday came too fast. Clara spent the morning in a haze of dread, scrubbing floors with more force than necessary, kneading bread until her knuckles ached. The blue dress hung in her room like an accusation. It was the nicest thing she owned, a hand-me-down from a guest who'd left it behind years ago, but it fit poorly, tight in the shoulders and loose in the waist. She put it on anyway. At 4 o'clock, Mrs. Henshaw arrived with Thomas in tow. He looked worse than Clara remembered. Thinner, paler, with the kind of tremor in his hands that came from too much drinking and not enough food. His mother prodded him forward like a reluctant dog. Clara, dear, Mrs. Henshaw cooed, don't you look lovely? Thank you. Thomas, say hello. Hello. His voice was flat, disinterested. Martin ushered them into the sitting room, the one reserved for guests who mattered. Clara followed, feeling like a piece of furniture being appraised. Mrs. Henshaw settled into the best chair and launched into a monologue about Thomas's many virtues, his family connections, his potential, his good heart. Thomas himself sat slumped, saying nothing, staring at a spot on the wall. Clara tried to listen. She tried to imagine a life with this man in some small house, cooking his meals and mending his clothes and pretending she'd chosen it. She couldn't. Of course, Mrs. Henshaw was saying, marriage is about partnership, compromise. Thomas would need a wife who understands that a man requires certain freedoms. Freedoms, Clara repeated. Well, yes, men have needs, social needs. A wife can't expect him to be home every evening. You mean drinking. The room went silent. Mrs. Henshaw's smile froze. I beg your pardon? You're saying he'd keep drinking, that I'd be expected to tolerate it. Martin stood abruptly. Clara, because if that's the partnership being offered, I'd like to know now. How dare you? Mrs. Henshaw's face flushed. Thomas is offering you a respectable position, and you're being incredibly rude. I'm being honest. You're being ungrateful. Thomas finally looked up, bleary-eyed. She doesn't want me, Ma. Leave it. Nonsense, she's just nervous. I'm not nervous, Clara said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. I'm not interested. Mrs. Henshaw gasped. Martin's face went purple. Clara, he said, voice dangerous. A word, now. He grabbed her arm and hauled her into the hallway, slamming the door behind them. What the hell is wrong with you? I'm not marrying him. You don't have a choice. I do, actually. I can choose to say no. His hand cracked across her face. The sound echoed in the narrow hallway. Her cheek blazed, eyes watering. but she didn't move. "You'll apologize," Martin said. "You'll go back in there and apologize, and you'll accept Thomas's offer, and you'll be grateful." "No!" He hit her again, harder. This time she staggered, catching herself against the wall. Blood welled in her mouth where her teeth had cut her lip. Martin leaned in close. "You think you can defy me? In my house? You're nothing, Clara. You understand? Nothing. And if you don't do what I say, you'll be out on the street by morning." She looked up at him, vision blurring, and felt that cold clarity sharpen into something else. Rage. Pure, clean, burning rage. "Then I guess I'm nothing," she said, and she spit blood on his polished shoes. For a second he just stared. Then he lunged. She was ready this time. She shoved past him, stumbling toward the door, not back into the sitting room, but toward the exit. He grabbed her dress, fabric tearing, but she wrenched free and ran. Out the door. Into the street. People turned to stare. A woman in a torn dress, blood on her chin, running like something was chasing her. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of town, lungs burning, legs shaking. Then she collapsed against a fence and sobbed. But she didn't go back. That night she slept in a barn on the outskirts of town, buried in hay, shivering. In the morning, she walked to the train station with nothing but the clothes on her back and terror in her throat. The station master looked at her with obvious pity. "Ticket? I don't have money." "Can't help you, miss." She stood there helpless until a voice behind her said, "I'll cover it." She turned. The man was older, weathered, with the look of someone who'd spent his life outdoors. He tipped his hat. "Name's Joel Crawford. I run a service, placing women out west. You looking for work?" Yes, anything." He studied her. "You healthy? Got a trade?" "I can cook, clean, I'm strong." "Good enough." He pulled out a card. "I've got a placement in Wyoming. Rancher looking for a wife. Pays passage, room and board. Interested?" A wife. The word should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like the only door left open. "What's his name?" "Cole Dawson. Runs cattle. Needs help around the place." He paused. "Fair warning, it's hard country. Not for the faint of heart." She thought about Martin, about Mrs. Henshaw, about that storage room and those years of swallowing herself smaller and smaller. "I'll take it," she said. Crawford handed her a ticket. "Train leaves in an hour. Don't be late." She wasn't. The train ride took 3 days, and Clara spent most of it pressed against the window, watching the landscape change from familiar to foreign. The trees thinned out. The towns grew smaller, then disappeared altogether. By the second day, there was nothing but grass and sky, stretching endlessly in every direction. She shared a car with 2 other women, both younger, both traveling to marriages they'd arranged through similar services. They chattered nervously about their future husbands, comparing the letters they'd received, speculating about what their new homes would look like. Clara had no letters. Crawford had given her a name and a location, nothing more. Cole Dawson, Wyoming Territory, a cattle ranch. That was it. "What about you?" one of the girls asked. Sarah, barely 19, with blonde ringlets and nervous hands. "What's your man like?" "I don't know." "You don't have letters?" "No." The girls exchanged glances. The other one, Margaret, darker, quieter, leaned forward. "Didn't you ask questions?" "There wasn't time." "But what if he's—" Sarah dropped her voice. "What if he's awful?" Clara looked out the window at the endless grass. "Then I'll figure it out." She said it with more confidence than she felt. The truth was, she had no idea what she was walking into. For all she knew, Cole Dawson could be worse than Martin, worse than Thomas Henshaw. She could be trading one prison for another, but at least this prison was her choice. The thought was thin comfort, but it was all she had. On the 3rd day, the train started stopping at stations that barely deserved the name. Wooden platforms in the middle of nowhere. A few buildings clustered nearby like they were huddling for warmth. Sarah got off at the first one, her future husband waiting with a wagon. She waved goodbye, trying to smile, but her face was pale. Margaret left at the second stop. She didn't wave. Clara was alone after that. The conductor came through, checking tickets. When he saw hers, he frowned. "Dawson Ranch?" "Yes." "That's the end of the line. Another 2 hours." "All right." He hesitated. You sure about this, miss? It's rough country out there. I'm sure. She wasn't, but what else could she say? The last 2 hours dragged. The train slowed, the landscape growing rougher, hills rising in the distance, scrub brush replacing grass. The sky seemed bigger here, somehow. Emptier. When the train finally lurched to a stop, Clara stood on shaking legs and gathered her things. She didn't have much. The torn dress, a shawl, the shoes on her feet. Everything else had been left behind. The platform was just a few boards hammered together. Beyond it, a single dirt road stretched toward a cluster of buildings that might generously be called a town. A general store. A saloon. A church with peeling paint. And standing beside a wagon, hat pulled low against the sun, was a man. Clara's heart kicked. He was tall, taller than she'd expected, with broad shoulders and a face that looked like it had been carved out of something hard. Weathered skin, dark hair, eyes she couldn't read from this distance. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just stood there, watching her descend from the train like she was a problem he was trying to solve. She walked toward him, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she was close enough, she stopped. Mr. Dawson? He looked her up and down, slow and deliberate. His expression didn't change. You Clara Whitlock? Yes. A long pause, then, you're not what I was told. Her stomach dropped. What were you told? Blonde, small, 20 years old. His eyes, gray, cold, met hers. You're none of those things. The humiliation was immediate and familiar. Of course. Of course Crawford had lied. Of course she wasn't what this man wanted. She lifted her chin. Do you want me to get back on the train? He didn't answer right away, just kept looking at her like he was doing calculations in his head. Finally, he said, Train's already gone. She turned. He was right. The train was pulling away, smoke trailing behind it. Next one doesn't come through for a week, Dawson said. Then I'll wait. Where? She looked around, the platform, the road, the town that was barely a town. I'll figure it out. With what money? She didn't answer. He exhaled, sharp and frustrated. Get in the wagon. I'm not leaving you here. Get in the wagon. It wasn't kindness in his voice. It was irritation, obligation, but it was better than being stranded. She climbed up, settling onto the hard bench. He swung up beside her, taking the reins without a word. The wagon lurched forward, wheels crunching over dirt. They rode in silence. Clara kept her eyes forward, trying not to notice the way he sat stiff beside her, jaw tight. Trying not to think about what happened next. A week until the train. She'd need somewhere to stay, something to eat. She had nothing to trade, nothing to offer. After about 10 minutes, Dawson spoke. You run away from something? She glanced at him. What makes you say that? The dress. The lack of luggage. The way you looked when you got off that train. Maybe I just travel light. Maybe. He didn't sound convinced. Or maybe you're running. She faced forward again. Does it matter? Might. Why? Because I don't need someone else's trouble showing up at my door. Fair enough. My trouble won't follow me here. You sure about that? She thought of Martin, of Mrs. Henshaw, of that whole town that had barely noticed when she disappeared. I'm sure. Another stretch of silence. The road wound through low hills, grass bending in the wind. In the distance, she could see mountains, real mountains, snow-capped and massive. She'd never seen anything like them. Crawford told me you could cook, Dawson said eventually. I can. Clean? Yes. Work hard? Yes. He grunted. Not quite approval, but not dismissal either. My ranch is about an hour out. It's just me and one hired hand. We run cattle, some horses. It's not easy work. I'm not afraid of work. You ever lived outside of town before? No. It's different out here, isolated. Winters are brutal. Supply runs are once a month if we're lucky. If something breaks, you fix it yourself or do without. She absorbed that. All right, he repeated, like he was testing the words. Then, here's what I'm offering. You stay 1 week. You work. Cooking, cleaning, whatever needs doing. At the end of the week, the train comes back through. You can leave or you can stay. And if I stay? We talk about terms. What kind of terms? His hands tightened on the reins. The kind that don't involve me being stuck with someone who can't handle this life. It was blunt, almost harsh. But it was also more than she'd expected. A choice. Not a trap. Not an obligation. Just a week. That's fair, she said. He glanced at her, something flickering in his expression. Surprise, maybe. You really got nowhere else to go, do you? No? Then I guess we'll see how this goes. The ranch appeared just as the sun started dipping low, painting the sky orange and pink. It wasn't much. A main house, low and sturdy, built from wood and stone. A barn, a corral, a few outbuildings. Cattle dotted the hills beyond, dark shapes against the grass. It was the most beautiful thing Clara had ever seen. Dawson pulled the wagon up to the house and climbed down. I'll show you where you'll sleep. It's not fancy. I don't need fancy. He led her inside. The house was simple. One main room with a fireplace, a kitchen area, a table. 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. It was clean but sparse, functional. A man's space. There's a room in the back, he said, opening one of the doors. Belonged to my mother before she died. You can use it. Clara stepped inside. A bed, a dresser, a window with faded curtains. It was small, plain, perfect. Thank you. He nodded, already turning away. I'll bring your... He stopped. You don't have anything, do you? No. A pause. I'll see if I can find some things. Clothes, maybe. Won't fit right, but it's better than nothing. You don't have to... I know I don't have to, but I'm not having you work in a torn dress. He walked toward the other bedroom, then stopped in the doorway. Dinner's at 6. If you can cook, prove it. Then he was gone. Clara stood in the middle of the room, heart pounding, and realized she'd just agreed to stay in the house of a man she didn't know, in a place she'd never been, doing work she wasn't sure she could manage. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something close to relief. She found the kitchen stocked better than she'd expected. Flour, salt, some dried meat, a few vegetables that had seen better days. Not much, but enough. She set to work, her hands remembering rhythms she'd performed 1,000 times. Bread dough, stew, simple, filling. By 6, she had food on the table. Dawson came in with another man, shorter, older, with a face like worn leather. This is Hank, Dawson said. He works here. Hank nodded at her. Ma'am. Clara. They sat. Both men looked at the food, then at her. Go ahead, she said. Hank dug in immediately. Dawson was slower, more deliberate. He took a bite of bread, chewed, swallowed. It's good, he said finally. Thank you. Better than good, actually. Hank grinned. Best meal I've had in months. Dawson shot him a look. I cook fine. You cook functional. There's a difference. Despite herself, Clara almost smiled. They ate in relative silence after that. When they were done, Hank stood, stretching. I'll check the horses before bed. Go ahead. Hank left. Clara started clearing plates, but Dawson's voice stopped her. Leave them. I'll do it. You don't have to... You cooked. I clean. That's how it works here. She set the plates down, unsure. He stood, rolling up his sleeves, and started pumping water into the basin. You can go to bed if you're tired, he said without looking at her. I'm all right. Suit yourself. She lingered, watching him scrub the plates with rough efficiency. After a moment, she said, Why did you agree to this? The arrangement with Crawford. He didn't stop working. Needed help. Ranch is too much for 2 people. You could have hired someone. I did. You. That's not what I mean. He finally looked at her. You mean why a wife instead of a hand? Yes. He dried his hands slowly. Because a hand leaves. A wife stays. That's not always true. No, he agreed. But it's the idea. And if I leave at the end of the week, then I'll figure something else out. He leaned against the counter. Look, I'm not going to lie to you. This isn't a love match. I don't know you. You don't know me. But I need help and you need a place. Maybe that's enough. It was the most honest thing anyone had said to her in years. Maybe, she said quietly. He nodded. Get some sleep. Work starts early. She did. The bed was harder than she was used to, the room colder, but she slept better than she had in months. The next morning started before dawn. Clara woke to the sound of boots on the floor, voices outside. She dressed quickly. Dawson had left a shirt and pants outside her door, both too big but serviceable, and went to the kitchen. Hank was already there, pouring coffee. Morning? Morning. What time is it? Just past 5. We start early out here. What needs doing? He grinned. You really asking? I am. Well, the chickens need feeding. The cow needs milking. And if you're feeling ambitious, the garden's a mess. Hasn't been touched since Cole's mother died 2 years back. I can handle that. Good, because Cole's been useless at it. Dawson walked in, hearing that last part. I keep us fed. Barely, Hank muttered. Clara hid a smile and headed outside. The chickens were easy. She'd done this 100 times before. The cow was less cooperative, clearly not used to her, but she managed. The garden, though, that was a disaster. Weeds had taken over completely, choking out whatever had been planted before. The soil was hard, dry. A few stubborn plants clung to life, but barely. Clara stood there, hands on her hips, and felt something shift in her chest. She could fix this. She found tools in the barn, a hoe, a spade, gloves with holes in the fingers. And she started working. It was hard, harder than she'd expected. The sun climbed higher, beating down, her back ached, her hands blistered even through the gloves. But she kept going, tearing out weeds, turning soil, clearing space. She didn't notice Dawson watching until he spoke. You don't have to do that. She straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead. I know. Then why are you? Because it needs doing. He walked closer, looking at the cleared patch. My mother loved this garden. Spent hours out here. What did she grow? Vegetables mostly, some herbs, a few flowers. His voice softened, just slightly. She said it made the place feel less harsh. Clara looked at the land around them, the endless grass, the distant mountains. It is harsh. Yeah. But it's beautiful too. He glanced at her, surprised. You think so? I do. Something passed between them, not quite understanding, but recognition. Like they were both seeing something the other had missed. Keep at it if you want, he said. I'll get you better tools. He did. By midday, she had a proper hoe, a rake, seeds for planting. By evening, she'd cleared half the garden and her body screamed in protest. At dinner, she could barely lift her fork. You overdid it, Dawson said. I'm fine. You can barely move. I'll be fine tomorrow. Hank chuckled. She's stubborn. I like her. Dawson didn't comment, but his eyes lingered on her just a moment longer than necessary. The days blurred together after that. Clara worked the garden, cooked meals, kept the house in order. Dawson and Hank handled the cattle, the horses, the endless repairs that a ranch demanded. They moved around each other carefully, like strangers sharing a space neither had quite agreed to. But slowly, things started to shift. On the third day, Clara finished the garden and started planting. Dawson came out to check on her progress and ended up staying, helping her mark rows, offering advice on what grew best in this soil. On the fourth day, Hank taught her how to handle the horses. She was nervous at first. They were bigger than she'd expected, less predictable than chickens or cows. But he was patient, showing her how to approach them, how to read their moods. On the fifth day, it rained. Not a gentle rain, but a downpour that turned the yard to mud and sent everyone scrambling to cover supplies and move livestock. Clara worked alongside the men, soaked through, hauling tarps and securing gates. By the time it stopped, she was exhausted, filthy, and oddly exhilarated. Dawson handed her a towel. You all right? I'm great. He almost smiled. You're crazy. Maybe. That night, after dinner, they sat by the fire. Hank had gone to bed early, leaving Clara and Dawson alone. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, but heavy with things unsaid. Finally, Dawson spoke. Train comes tomorrow. Her stomach dropped. She'd been so focused on the work, she'd almost forgotten. I know. You thought about what you're doing? Some? And? She looked at the fire, flames dancing. Can I ask you something first? Go ahead. Why did Crawford lie? About what I looked like? Dawson's jaw tightened. Because he knew I wouldn't choose you if he told the truth. The words stung, even though she'd expected them. Because I'm not pretty. Because you're not what men like me are supposed to want. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Crawford sent me letters. 3 women interested in the placement, all of them young, delicate, the kind of women who look good on a man's arm. And you picked one of them. I picked the one I thought could handle this life. Or so I thought. He exhaled. Crawford switched you in. Probably figured once you got here, I'd be too decent to send you back. He was right. Yeah, he was. Dawson looked at her. But here's the thing. Those other women? They wouldn't have lasted a day. You've lasted 5 and you haven't complained once. I've complained plenty, just not out loud. That got a real smile out of him. Small, but real. So, he said, train tomorrow. What are you doing? Clara thought about the garden, about the house that smelled like bread instead of emptiness, about the way Hank joked with her like she was part of the team, about Dawson, who was rough and blunt but never cruel. She thought about Martin, about that storage room, about being nothing. I'm staying, she said. Dawson went very still. You sure? I'm sure. This isn't easy, Clara. The life here, it doesn't get easier. I know. And I'm not... He stopped, frustrated. I'm not good at this. At talking. At making people feel welcome. I'm used to being alone. So am I. He studied her, really looked at her, like he was trying to see past the surface. Why did you run? She could lie. She could give him a version that made her sound less pathetic, less broken. But she was tired of lying. My brother was going to force me to marry a drunk, she said, or throw me out. I chose out. That why your dress was torn? He didn't like that I said no. Dawson's expression darkened. He hit you. Yes. More than once. It wasn't a question. She nodded. For a long moment, he didn't say anything. Then, he ever comes here, I'll kill him. He said it quietly, matter of fact, not a threat, a promise. Claire's throat tightened. He won't come. Good. They sat in silence after that, the fire crackling between them. Finally, Dawson stood. I'll ride into town tomorrow. Tell Crawford you're staying. We'll need to make it legal eventually, but there's no rush. Legal? Marriage license. Make it official. He saw her face and added, only if you want. We don't have to. What do you want? He looked uncomfortable. I want you to feel safe here, however that needs to happen. It was the kindest thing anyone had ever said to her. A license is fine, she said. He nodded. All right then. All right. He headed toward his room, then paused. Clara? Yes? Thank you for staying. Before she could respond, he was gone. Clara sat by the fire a while longer, letting the warmth seep into her bones, and allowed herself to feel something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next morning, Dawson left early for town. Clara threw herself into work, trying not to think about what staying meant, what she'd just committed to. The garden needed watering, the house needed sweeping, the chickens needed tending, normal things, good things. Hank found her around midday, hauling water from the well. You don't have to work this hard, you know. You already proved yourself. I'm not trying to prove anything. Then what are you trying to do? She set the bucket down, breathing hard. Earn my place. You already have a place. Do I? He tilted his head. You really don't see it, do you? See what? The way this ranch has changed since you got here. The way Cole's changed. He's barely spoken to me. That's more than he speaks to most people. Hank grinned. Trust me, girl, you've already earned it. Now you just gotta believe it. He walked off, leaving Clara standing in the yard, bucket in hand, wondering if he might be right. Dawson returned just before sunset, riding in with a paper in his hand. He dismounted, tied the horse, and walked over. Got the license, he said, handing it to her. We can sign it whenever you're ready. Clara looked at the document. Official. Legal. Real. There's something else, Dawson said. He sounded uncomfortable. There's talk in town. Her heart sank. What kind of talk? About you. About us. Crawford's been running his mouth, and people have opinions. What are they saying? That I got tricked, that you're not fit to be a rancher's wife, that I should send you back. He met her eyes. I don't care what they say, but I wanted you to know. Clara's hands tightened on the paper. Of course people were talking. She wasn't what they expected, wasn't what anyone wanted. Maybe they're right, she said quietly. They're not. You don't know that. I know you've worked harder in 5 days than most people work in a month. I know you didn't quit when everything was stacked against you. I know you're stronger than half the men in that town. His voice softened, just slightly. I know I'm glad you stayed. She looked up at him, this man who'd been a stranger a week ago, and felt something crack open in her chest. I'm glad too, she whispered. He nodded, then glanced at the paper. We don't have to sign it tonight. You can think about it. I don't need to think about it. Clara, I want to sign it. He searched her face. You're sure? I'm sure. They went inside. Hank was at the table, pretending not to listen. Dawson spread the license out, found a pen. We'll need a witness, he said. Hank stood. I'll do it. Dawson signed first, his handwriting rough but clear. Then he handed the pen to Clara. Her hand shook as she wrote her name. Clara Whitlock. Soon to be Clara Dawson. It felt surreal, permanent, terrifying. Hank signed as witness, then clapped Dawson on the shoulder. Congratulations, boss. Thanks. I'll leave you two alone. He headed for the door, then paused. Welcome to the family, Clara. She managed a smile. Thank you. When he was gone, she and Dawson stood in awkward silence. So, she said. So, what happens now? He folded the license carefully. Now we figure out how to live together without driving each other crazy. Think we can manage that? We'll find out. He was right. They did find out. The first few weeks were strange, learning each other's rhythms, navigating shared space. Dawson was a man of routines, early mornings and long days, silence more comfortable to him than conversation. Clara was used to constant motion, constant noise. They clashed sometimes, small friction points that could have grown into something bigger. But they didn't. Instead, they learned. Clara learned that Dawson liked his coffee strong and hated when she rearranged his tools. Dawson learned that Clara needed time alone in the garden and got anxious when supplies ran low. They adapted. The garden bloomed under Clara's care, vegetables pushed through the soil, herbs filled the air with scent. She even planted flowers along the edge, small bright spots of color against the endless brown and green. Dawson never said anything about the flowers, but she caught him looking at them sometimes. The ranch work continued, brutal and unforgiving. There were days Clara thought her body would give out, muscles screaming, hands raw. But she kept going. She learned to rope cattle, mend fences, predict weather by the shape of clouds. Hank said she was a natural. Dawson just nodded, but she could see something in his eyes. Approval, maybe. Or respect. It was enough. 1 month in, supply day arrived. Dawson hitched the wagon early. You coming to town? Clara hesitated. Do you want me to? It's up to you. She thought about the talk he'd mentioned, the opinions. Maybe I should stay here. Maybe you shouldn't let them run you off. She looked at him, surprised. You're my wife, he said. Legal and official. They can think whatever they want, but you've got every right to be there. She climbed into the wagon. The town looked smaller than she remembered. Or maybe she'd gotten bigger. They pulled up to the general store, and heads turned immediately. Clara kept her chin up and followed Dawson inside. The store owner, a thin man with spectacles, looked between them. Mr. Dawson, ma'am? Morning, Pete. Need the usual supplies. Of course. Pete started gathering items, eyes flicking to Clara. I heard you got married. You heard right. Congratulations. Thanks. It was painfully civil, but Clara could feel the weight of judgment, the questions people were too polite to ask. She wandered the store while Dawson handled business, running her fingers over fabric, tools, jars of preserves. She found herself in front of a display of seeds, flowers, vegetables, herbs. See something you like? Dawson's voice behind her. Just looking. He picked up a packet of flower seeds. For the garden? We don't need... Add them to the order, Pete. Pete nodded, scribbling. Clara stared at Dawson. He shrugged. Your garden. Your choice. It was a small thing. Stupid, really. Just seeds. But it felt like more. They loaded the wagon and were heading out when a voice called, Cole Dawson! They turned. A woman was approaching, middle-aged, well-dressed, with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Mrs. Fletcher, Dawson said evenly, I wanted to meet your new wife. Mrs. Fletcher looked Clara up and down. How lovely. Thank you. You must be quite the homemaker. I heard Cole's ranch was in desperate need of a woman's touch. Clara felt the barb, but kept her expression neutral. I do my best. I'm sure you do. Mrs. Fletcher's smile sharpened. Though I must say, we were all quite surprised by the match. You're not at all what we expected. No, Clara said quietly. I suppose I'm not. Well, I hope you're settling in. Frontier life can be so difficult for women who aren't accustomed to hard work. Dawson stepped forward. Clara works harder than most men I know, Mrs. Fletcher. Now, if you'll excuse us. He guided Clara to the wagon, his hand firm on her back. They rode in silence for a while. Then Clara said, I'm sorry. For what? For embarrassing you. In front of her. He pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to face her. You didn't embarrass me. She clearly thinks, I don't care what she thinks, or what anyone in that town thinks. His eyes were fierce. You're my wife. You work harder, care more, and do better than half the people who look down on you. And if they can't see that, they're idiots. Clara's throat tightened. Thank you. Don't thank me for telling the truth. He started the wagon again, and they continued home. That night, after dinner, Clara found herself standing in the doorway of her room, looking across the main space to Dawson's door. They lived in the same house, worked the same land, shared the same name. But they were still strangers in so many ways. She wondered if that would ever change. In his room, Dawson lay awake, staring at the ceiling. He'd meant what he said to Mrs. Fletcher. Every word. Clara was strong, capable, everything this ranch needed. Everything he needed, though he'd never admit it. He'd spent 2 years alone after his mother died, convinced he was fine with solitude. Then Clara showed up, wrong in every way according to Crawford, perfect in ways Dawson was only starting to understand. She fit here, in this harsh land, in this life, in his house. He didn't know what to do with that feeling, so he did what he always did. He worked, pushed harder, kept his distance. It was safer that way. But every day, it got a little harder to maintain that distance. Every meal she cooked, every smile she shared with Hank, every time he caught her in the garden, dirt on her hands and satisfaction on her face, it chipped away at the walls he'd built. He was starting to care, and that terrified him more than anything the frontier had ever thrown at him. The trouble started 6 weeks after Clara signed the marriage license. It began with whispers that grew into conversations that grew into something uglier. Mrs. Fletcher, it turned out, had a talent for spreading poison dressed up as concern. She told her friends, who told their husbands, who mentioned it at the saloon. Within days, the whole town had an opinion about Cole Dawson's unusual wife. Clara heard about it from Hank, who'd gone into town for nails and come back looking uncomfortable. They're saying things, he told her, standing in the barn doorway while she mucked out stalls. She didn't stop working. What kind of things? That Cole got swindled. That you're not really his wife, just some woman taking advantage. He hesitated. That you two aren't living as man and wife should. Her hand stilled on the pitchfork. And how would they know that? They don't. They're guessing, but the guessing's turning into stories, and the stories are getting mean. Clara resumed shoveling, jaw tight. Let them talk. It's not just talk anymore. Some of the ranchers are saying Cole's not respectable, that it reflects poorly on all of them. That's ridiculous. I know that, you know that. But out here, reputation matters, and right now yours is getting shredded. She threw the pitchfork down, breathing hard. What do they want from me? I work. I keep my head down. I don't bother anyone. They want you to be what they expected. Small, quiet, decorative. Someone who makes Cole look good just by existing. Hank's expression was sympathetic. You're not that, and it scares them. I scare them. You don't fit their idea of how things should be. That's always scary to people with small minds. Clara leaned against the stall, exhausted. Does Cole know? If he doesn't, he will soon. He was right. That evening, Dawson came in from the north pasture with a face like a thunderstorm. He barely spoke through dinner, just pushed food around his plate and drank coffee with single-minded intensity. When Hank excused himself, Clara stayed at the table. "You heard," she said. Dawson's jaw tightened. "Yeah. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault." He stood abruptly, pacing. "I knew there'd be talk. I didn't think it'd get this bad. What are they saying now? That we're not really married, that it's some kind of arrangement, that you're just a housekeeper I'm passing off as a wife." He stopped, facing her. "Jim Patterson suggested I send you back, find someone more suitable." Clara's stomach dropped. "What did you say?" "I told him to mind his own business." His hands clenched. "But he's not the only one. There's a group of them, the ranchers' wives mostly, who've decided you're a problem. Because I don't fit, because they're small-minded and cruel." He exhaled sharply. "There's talk of not inviting us to the harvest gathering next month, of excluding us from town events." Clara stood. "Then we don't go. We stay here, work the ranch, ignore them." "It's not that simple. Out here, being excluded means being cut off. No help when you need it, no trading, no community support. We can't survive completely alone. We've been doing fine so far, because people have been willing to trade to help with big jobs. That dries up, we're in trouble." He looked at her, something raw in his expression. "I won't let them hurt you like this." "They're not hurting me, they're just talking. Talking can hurt worse than fists sometimes." She thought of Martin, of Mrs. Henshaw, of all the ways words had carved pieces out of her over the years. "I know." They stood there, the fire crackling between them, both aware that this problem wasn't going away. "There might be a way to quiet them," Dawson said slowly. "How?" "We make it look real, the marriage. Act like a proper couple in public." Claire's throat went dry. "You mean—" "I mean, we give them what they expect to see. I don't know. Stand closer. Talk more. Make it obvious. We're together." He looked uncomfortable. "Whatever married people do." "We are married?" "On paper. But we live like strangers. You sleep in your room, I sleep in mine. We barely talk unless it's about work." He ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not saying we have to change anything here, just when we're in town." It made sense, tactically, but the idea of performing intimacy they didn't feel made Clara's skin crawl. "And you think that'll be enough?" "I don't know, maybe. Or maybe it'll make things worse." He met her eyes. "You don't have to do this. We can just weather it, wait for them to find someone else to talk about." "How long will that take?" "Could be months. Could be years." Clara thought about Mrs. Fletcher's smile, sharp as a knife, about the way the store owner had looked at her, about living under that judgment, that constant low-grade hostility. "We'll try it your way," she said. Relief crossed his face. "You're sure?" "No, but I don't have a better idea." The next town trip came 3 days later. Clara dressed carefully, her best dress, hair pinned up properly, the small silver earrings that had been her mother's. She looked at herself in the cracked mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. When she emerged, Dawson stopped mid-step. "You look nice." "Thank you." "I mean it. You look—" He cleared his throat. "Nice." The ride into town was tense. Dawson kept glancing at her, like he was trying to memorize instructions for a complicated task. Finally, Clara said, "We don't have to do this." "Yes, we do." "Cole, I'm not letting them run you off, not without a fight." They pulled up to the general store. Dawson climbed down, then did something he'd never done before. He came around to her side and offered his hand. She took it, stepping down. His hand was warm, rough with calluses. He didn't let go immediately. They walked into the store together, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. The touch was foreign, awkward, but it looked right. Pete looked up from the counter. "Morning, Mr. Dawson, Mrs. Dawson." "Morning," Dawson said. "We need supplies." While Pete gathered items, Clara wandered the store. She felt eyes on her, other customers pretending not to stare. She picked up fabric, examining it with interest she didn't feel. Dawson appeared beside her. "You like that one?" "It's pretty." "Then we'll take it." He raised his voice slightly. Pete, add 3 yards of the blue fabric. You don't have to. I want to. He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. My wife deserves nice things. The words hung in the air. Clara felt her face heat, but Dawson's expression was determined. They finished shopping and loaded the wagon. As they were leaving, Mrs. Fletcher appeared, as if summoned by gossip instinct. Why, Mr. and Mrs. Dawson, what a surprise! Dawson's hand found Clara's waist. Mrs. Fletcher. I was just telling my husband how we should have you both over for dinner sometime. Get to know Clara better. The invitation was obviously insincere, but Dawson played along. That's kind of you. Of course, we're also curious about how you two met. Such an unusual arrangement. Clara felt Dawson tense beside her. Before he could respond, she said, Not that unusual. Lots of marriages start as practical arrangements. Ours just happened to become more. Mrs. Fletcher's eyebrows rose. More? We've been very fortunate, Clara continued, leaning slightly into Dawson. The move felt calculated, false, but Mrs. Fletcher's eyes narrowed. Cole's been wonderful. Has he now? Mrs. Fletcher's smile was razor thin. Well, isn't that lovely? I do hope you'll both come to the harvest gathering. It would be such a shame if you missed it. We'll be there, Dawson said firmly. They escaped to the wagon. Once they were out of town, Dawson exhaled. That was awful. I was going to say convincing, but awful works too. Clara pulled away from him, creating distance. Did it work, do you think? No idea, but at least we tried. They rode in silence for a while. Then Clara said, I shouldn't have said that, about the marriage becoming more. That was too much. It sold it, though. It was a lie. He didn't respond right away. When he did, his voice was careful. Was it? She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? I mean... He stopped, frustrated. Never mind. Forget it. But Clara couldn't forget it. The question sat between them the whole ride home, heavy with implications neither was ready to examine. That night she lay awake, staring at the ceiling. In the next room she heard Dawson moving around, restless. Things were changing. She could feel it like pressure before a storm. The days that followed were strange. In private, nothing changed. They still worked, ate, lived in careful parallel. But there was a new awareness now, a consciousness of each other that hadn't existed before. Clara caught herself watching him more. The way he moved, efficient and sure. The rare times he smiled. The patience he showed with the animals, gentle despite his rough exterior. And sometimes she'd look up to find him watching her. Neither acknowledged it. 2 weeks later, a storm rolled in. Not the violent kind, just a steady rain that turned everything to mud and made outdoor work miserable. They were forced inside, cooped up together with cabin fever setting in. Hank had ridden out before the rain started, planning to check the far pasture and stay at the line shack overnight, which meant Clara and Dawson were alone. She cooked. He pretended to repair tack he'd already fixed twice. The silence grew oppressive. Finally, Clara set down her spoon. We can't keep doing this. Dawson looked up. Doing what? Pretending. In town, we act like a married couple. Here, we barely speak. It's exhausting. What do you want me to do? I don't know. Talk to me. Ask me questions. Treat me like a person instead of a housekeeper. He set the tack down. I do treat you like a person. Do you? Because most of the time I feel like a piece of furniture you're being polite about. That's not fair. Maybe not, but it's true. She faced him. You know everything about me. You know where I came from, why I ran, what I'm afraid of. I don't know anything about you. There's nothing to know. That's not true. He stood, pacing. What do you want to hear, Clara? That my father drank himself to death and left my mother to run this place alone? That I watched her work herself into an early grave trying to keep it going? That I'm terrified of failing her, of losing everything she built? The words came out harsh, raw. Clara stared at him. You want to know me? He continued. Fine. I'm a man who doesn't know how to talk to people. Who's better with animals than humans? Who got so desperate for help that I agreed to marry a stranger and then felt like the world's biggest fool when the wrong woman showed up? The wrong woman. Clara repeated, something breaking in her chest. That's what I thought at first. That Crawford had cheated me. That I'd been stuck with someone I didn't want. He stopped, looking at her. I was wrong. She couldn't breathe. What? I was wrong, he said again, quieter. You're not the wrong woman. You're just not what I expected. Is that supposed to make me feel better? I don't know. I'm not good at this. He sat down heavily. I'm trying to tell you that I'm glad you're here, that this place is better with you in it, that I... He stopped, jaw working. That you what? That I don't know how to do this, any of this. I know how to work, how to survive, but actual living, being around someone, caring about them, I have no idea. Clara moved closer, slowly, like approaching a spooked horse. You're doing better than you think. I ignore you half the time. And the other half, you defend me, support me, make me feel like I matter. You do matter. Then why do we live like strangers? He looked at her, something desperate in his eyes. Because I don't know how to be close to someone without losing them. My mother, my father, everyone I've ever cared about has left, either by choice or by dying. And I can't, his voice cracked. I can't do that again. The admission hung between them, vulnerable and painful. Clara sat beside him, not touching, but close. I'm not going anywhere. You don't know that. Yes, I do. I chose this. I chose to stay, to sign that license, to build a life here. With you. Why? Because for the first time in my life, someone looked at me and didn't see a burden. You saw someone who could work, who could contribute, who could be useful. She swallowed hard. And maybe that's not the most romantic reason, but it's real. It matters. He turned to face her. You're more than useful, Clara. What am I then? The question sat there huge and terrifying. Dawson opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. I don't have the words. Try. You're the reason I look forward to coming inside at the end of the day. The reason the house doesn't feel empty anymore. The reason He stopped, frustrated. Clara waited. The reason I care about what people say in town. Because it hurts you, and that makes me want to hurt them back. He met her eyes. You matter to me, more than I know how to handle. Her heart hammered. Cole? I know we married for practical reasons. I know this wasn't supposed to be about feelings, but I can't keep pretending I don't care when I do. Care about what? You. This. All of it. The rain drummed on the roof, filling the silence that followed. Clara reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away. When he didn't, she took his hand. His fingers were rough, warm, trembling slightly. I care too, she whispered. He looked at their joined hands like they were something miraculous. Yeah? Yeah. So what do we do now? I don't know. Figure it out as we go? That's not much of a plan. It's what we've been doing all along. He almost smiled. Then, carefully, hesitantly, he lifted his other hand to her face. His thumb brushed her cheek, the touch feather-light. Can I... She didn't let him finish. She leaned in, closing the distance, and kissed him. It was awkward at first, unpracticed, but then he responded, his hand sliding into her hair, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, becoming something real, something wanted. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dawson rested his forehead against hers. That was... yeah. They sat like that for a while, just breathing together, processing what had just shifted between them. Eventually, Clara said, We should probably talk about this. Probably. But not right now. No, not right now. He kissed her again, and talking stopped mattering. That night, Clara didn't sleep in her room. She fell asleep on the couch, Dawson's arm around her, the fire dying down to embers. It wasn't planned, wasn't discussed. It just happened, natural and right. When she woke, dawn was breaking and Dawson was still there, watching her. Morning, he said softly. Morning. Hank will be back soon and... Cole. Yeah? Stop overthinking. He relaxed slightly. I'm just not sure what happens now. We keep going. We work. We figure this out. Just like that? Just like that? It wasn't that simple, of course. Nothing ever was. But for the first time, Clara felt like they were actually trying, not just coexisting, but building something. Hank came back around mid-morning, took one look at them, and grinned. About time, was all he said. The next town trip, 3 days later, was different. Dawson took Clara's hand without hesitation. When they walked into the store, they moved together naturally. No performance required. Pete noticed. "You two seem happy." "We are," Dawson said simply. Mrs. Fletcher was in the store too, examining fabric with her sharp eyes. She watched them, clearly searching for something to criticize. Clara met her gaze steadily. She didn't smile, didn't perform, just stood there, Dawson's hand in hers, and refused to shrink. After a moment, Mrs. Fletcher looked away. Small victory, but it felt enormous. They finished shopping and were loading the wagon when a voice called out, "Cole Dawson!" Clara turned to see a group of men approaching, ranchers by the look of them. Dawson's posture went rigid. "Jim," he said carefully. Jim Patterson was a big man, thick through the middle, with a red face and aggressive stance. "We need to talk." "About what?" "About the harvest gathering. There's been discussion." "What kind of discussion?" Jim's eyes flicked to Clara, dismissive. "Some folks think it's best if certain people don't attend, keep things comfortable." Dawson's jaw went tight. "Certain people." "No offense intended, ma'am," Jim said to Clara, clearly intending offense. "But this is a community event for established families, people who fit." "My wife fits just fine," Dawson said, voice dangerously quiet. "Cole, be reasonable. You know how people feel. She's not what? Not small enough? Not pretty enough? Not whatever arbitrary standard you've decided matters? She's not one of us. She's my wife. That makes her one of us, whether you like it or not." Jim's face darkened. "You're making this difficult." "Good. Because you're being an ass." The other ranchers shifted uncomfortably. Jim took a step forward. "You want to lose your standing here? Because that's what'll happen. We take care of our own, but only if they follow the rules." "Then I guess I'm done following your rules." "You can't run a ranch alone, Cole. You need community support. Trading, help with big jobs, access to shared resources. You cut yourself off, you'll regret it. Maybe. But I'll regret betraying my wife more." Clara's throat tightened. She touched Dawson's arm. "Cole, we can—" "No." He didn't look at her, keeping his eyes on Jim. "We're done compromising. We're done trying to fit into boxes that don't fit us. If that means we're on our own, fine." Jim sneered. "Big words. Let's see how you feel come winter." "I'll feel just fine. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to do." Dawson helped Clara into the wagon and climbed up beside her. As they pulled away, she could feel the stares, hear the murmurs. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did. You might have just made everything worse." "I made it honest. That's better than pretending." She looked at him, this man who'd been a stranger, who'd become her husband, who was now defending her against his own community. "Thank you," she whispered. He took her hand. "Don't thank me. I'm just doing what I should have done from the start." They rode home in silence, both aware that things had just gotten significantly harder. Over the next week, the consequences became clear. No one came to trade. No one offered help with fence repairs. When Clara went to town alone for emergency supplies, they'd run out of flour. The store owner was polite but cold, prices mysteriously higher than usual. They were being punished. Hank noticed but didn't comment, just worked harder to pick up the slack. Clara threw herself into the garden, into cooking, into anything that kept her hands busy and her mind from spiraling. But at night, when she lay beside Dawson, they'd stopped pretending they didn't sleep together. She felt the weight of it. "This is my fault," she said one night. "It's not. If I'd been different, if I'd just—" "Clara," he rolled to face her. "If you'd been different, I wouldn't want you." "You don't know that." "I do. Because different would mean smaller, quieter, more willing to disappear to make other people comfortable. And that's not you. Maybe it should be." "No." His hand found hers in the dark. "The world has enough people willing to shrink themselves. It needs more people like you, who refuse to." She wanted to believe him, but the isolation was wearing, the constant knowledge that they were alone against everyone. "What if we can't make it through winter?" she asked. We will. You don't know that. I know we'll try. That's all anyone can do. She curled into him, letting his warmth steady her. I'm scared, she admitted. Me too. The honesty of it, the shared vulnerability, made it bearable. They'd face whatever came together. The harvest gathering happened without them. Clara tried not to think about the whole town celebrating while they were excluded. But the night of the event, sitting in their quiet house, she felt the sting of it. Dawson must have sensed her mood because he stood suddenly. Come on. Where? Outside. He led her into the yard. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like someone had thrown diamonds. He went to the barn and came back with a bottle. What's that? Whiskey. My father's. Been saving it. For what? For a night when we needed to say to hell with everyone else and have our own celebration. He opened the bottle, took a swig, and handed it to her. Clara hesitated, then drank. It burned going down, making her cough. Dawson grinned. Not much of a drinker? Not really. Good. More for me. He took another drink, then set the bottle down. You know what? What? I don't need their gathering. I don't need their approval. I've got everything that matters right here. Cole, I mean it. You, this ranch, the life we're building, that's enough. More than enough. He pulled her into a dance, humming off key, moving them in circles around the yard. Clara laughed despite herself. You're ridiculous. I'm happy. There's a difference. And looking at him, really looking, she realized he was telling the truth. Despite everything, despite the isolation and the struggle, he was happy. And so was she. They danced until they were dizzy, then collapsed in the grass, staring up at the stars. We're going to be okay, Dawson said. You think so? I know so, because we're too stubborn to be anything else. Clara laughed, the sound carrying into the night. He was right. They were stubborn. And maybe that was enough. But 3 days later, everything changed. A rider came up the road, dust trailing behind him. Clara was in the garden when she heard the hoofbeats. She stood, shading her eyes, trying to make out who it was. The man was unfamiliar, well-dressed, riding a good horse. He stopped at the house, dismounted, and knocked. Dawson emerged from the barn, expression wary. Help you? I'm looking for Clara Whitlock. Clara's blood went cold. She dropped the hoe and walked over slowly. I'm Clara Dawson now. The man looked her up and down. You're Clara Whitlock. I'm here on behalf of your brother, Martin Whitlock. The world tilted. What does he want? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He's demanding you return home immediately. He's arranged a marriage for you with Thomas Henshaw. The contract is already signed. I'm already married. He contests the validity of that marriage, says it was done without his permission or knowledge, which makes it illegal. Dawson stepped forward. That's not how it works. In your brother's jurisdiction it is. He's the legal guardian of unmarried women in his care. Since he didn't consent to this marriage, he's claiming it's void. She's 27 years old. She doesn't need his permission. The man pulled out papers. According to these documents, she does, and he's willing to pursue this legally if necessary. Clara's hands shook. I'm not going back. You don't have a choice, Miss Whitlock. It's Mrs. Dawson. Not according to the law. He held out the papers. You have 1 week to return voluntarily, or your brother will come get you, with law enforcement if necessary. He remounted and rode off, leaving the papers in Clara's trembling hands. She read them, each word a nail in her coffin. Martin had documented everything. Her age, her unmarried status at the time she left, his guardianship rights. He'd built a legal case that looked airtight. Dawson read over her shoulder, his face going pale. This can't be legal. It might be, I don't know. Clara's voice shook. I didn't think about guardianship. I thought once I left, I was free. You are free. Not if the law says otherwise. They stood there, the papers between them, reality crushing down. I won't let him take you, Dawson said. How are you going to stop him? If he comes with the sheriff, with legal authority, I'll fight him. And get arrested? Lose the ranch? I won't let you do that. Then what? You just go back? Marry Thomas Henshaw? Live under Martin's control? I don't know. The words came out sharp, desperate. I don't know what to do. Dawson pulled her close, his arms tight around her. She could feel his heart racing, matching her own. We'll figure it out, he said. We'll find a way. But neither of them could see what that way might be. That night, they lay awake, both pretending to sleep. Clara's mind raced through options, each one worse than the last. Run again. But where? How far would Martin pursue her? Fight legally, but with what money? What lawyer would take her case against a respectable hotel owner? Stay and face Martin when he came, and watch Dawson lose everything trying to protect her. Every path led to loss. Beside her, Dawson was equally awake, equally desperate. He'd meant what he said. He'd fight Martin, fight the whole legal system if he had to. But he wasn't stupid. He knew how this worked. Law favored men like Martin, respectable property owners with standing in the community. Men like him, isolated ranchers who'd married strange women under questionable circumstances, didn't stand a chance. Unless an idea formed, reckless and desperate. "Clara," he said into the darkness. "I'm awake. I have an idea. You're not going to like it. Tell me anyway." He sat up, lighting the lamp. In the flickering light, his face was determined. "We make it real," he said. "So real that no court can deny it. It is real. On paper. But Martin's arguing we're not truly married, that it's just a legal fiction, so we prove him wrong." Clara's stomach flipped. "How?" "We consummate it, publicly acknowledge it, get witnesses to testify that we live as man and wife in every way." He met her eyes. "Make it so legally binding that Martin can't touch it." Heat flooded her face. "Cole, I know it's not romantic. I know it's not how this should happen, but it's the only card we have to play." She processed this, heart racing. They'd shared a bed, kissed, held each other, but they hadn't gone further, both too uncertain, too aware of the practical origins of their marriage. Now he was suggesting they cross that line, not out of desire, but out of legal necessity. "And if it doesn't work?" she asked. "Then at least we tried everything." She looked at him, really looked, at the fear in his eyes, the determination. He wasn't asking for himself. He was offering the only protection he could. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay? If that's what it takes, then okay." He swallowed hard. "Clara, I don't want you to feel pressured." "I don't. I want this. Maybe not the circumstances, but..." She took his hand. "I want you. I want this marriage to be real in every way. I have for a while now." "You have?" "Yes." The fear in his eyes shifted to something else, something warm. "Then not tonight," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Not tonight, when we're scared and desperate, when it's about Martin and legal documents." He cupped her face. "When we do this, it'll be because we want each other, not because we're cornered." "But Martin, we have a week. We'll figure out the legal strategy tomorrow. Tonight," he kissed her softly. "Tonight we just sleep. Together. Safe." She nodded, throat tight. They lay back down, his arms around her, and somehow, impossibly, she slept. Tomorrow they'd face Martin's threat. Tomorrow they'd find a way to fight. But tonight they had this, each other. The quiet darkness and shared warmth. It was enough. For now, it was enough. Morning came too fast and brought no solutions. Clara woke to find Dawson already up, sitting at the table with the legal papers spread in front of him. His coffee had gone cold, untouched. "How long have you been awake?" she asked. "Couple hours. Been trying to find a loophole." He rubbed his face. "There isn't one." She sat beside him, reading over the documents again. Martin had been thorough, frighteningly so. He'd documented her age, her dependent status, even gotten statements from people in town confirming she'd lived under his care until she disappeared. "He planned this," she said. "Looks like it." "But why now? It's been months." Dawson pointed to a date on one of the papers. "This marriage contract with Thomas Henshaw. It was signed 3 weeks ago." "Without me there." "Doesn't matter, apparently. Martin signed as your guardian, Henshaw signed as the groom. According to this, you're legally obligated to fulfill it." Clara's stomach turned. "That can't be legal." "In some territories it is. If the guardian can prove the woman is incapable of making her own decisions, I'm perfectly capable. I know that. But Martin's claiming you ran away in a state of mental distress, that you're not thinking clearly, that this marriage to me is evidence of your impaired judgment." The words hit like punches. Of course, Martin would frame it that way, make her the problem, the unstable sister who needed protection from her own choices. "So what do we do?" she asked. "We could run, pack up, head further west, somewhere Martin can't reach." "And leave the ranch, your mother's legacy?" His jaw tightened. "If it means keeping you safe, no. I won't let you give that up for me." "Then we fight. Get a lawyer, challenge the guardianship claim." "With what money?" Silence. They both knew the answer. The ranch provided survival, not extra cash for legal battles. Hank came in, took one look at their faces, and poured himself coffee. "That bad?" "Worse," Dawson said. He explained the situation while Hank listened, expression darkening. "That's horseshit," Hank said when he finished. "Pardon my language, Clara, but it is." "Agreed, doesn't make it less real." Hank sat heavily. "What if we got the community on your side? If enough people testified that Clara's a good wife, that the marriage is legitimate, the same community that just excluded us from the harvest gathering?" Clara shook her head. "They won't help." "Some might. Not everyone agreed with what Jim Patterson and his crew did. It was a thin hope, but it was something." Dawson stood. "It's worth trying. I'll ride to the neighboring ranches, talk to people we've traded with, see if anyone's willing to stand with us." "I'll come with you," Hank said. "No, I need you here with Clara, in case Martin shows up early." The implication hung heavy, in case there was trouble. Clara stood. "I'm not hiding here while you fight my battles." "You're not hiding. You're staying safe." "Cole, please." His eyes were desperate. "Let me do this. Let me try to protect you." She wanted to argue, but the look on his face stopped her. "Okay," she said quietly. "But you come back. Promise me." "I promise." He left within the hour. Clara watched him ride off, then turned to the house feeling useless and caged. "He'll be all right," Hank said. "Cole's tougher than he looks." "It's not his toughness I'm worried about. It's whether anyone will listen." "They will. They have to." But the conviction in his voice sounded forced. Clara threw herself into work, anything to keep her mind occupied. She scrubbed floors that didn't need scrubbing, reorganized the pantry, weeded the garden twice. By afternoon, she was exhausted and no less anxious. Hank found her in the barn, mucking stalls with aggressive efficiency. "You're going to work yourself to death," he said. "Better than sitting around waiting." "Is it?" She stopped, leaning on the pitchfork. "I hate this. Being helpless. Having my fate decided by men in rooms I'm not allowed into." "You're not helpless." "Then what am I? What can I actually do?" Hank was quiet for a moment. Then, "You can tell me the truth. About your brother. About what happened before you came here." Clara's hands tightened on the handle. "Cole told you. Cole told me the basics. That your brother hit you. That you ran. But there's more to it, isn't there?" She didn't answer. "I'm asking," Hank continued gently, "because if we're going to fight this, we need to know everything, every detail that might help." He was right. She knew he was right. But dragging those memories into the light felt like touching an open wound. Still, she started talking. She told him about the years of dismissal, of being made to feel less than, about Martin's cruelty disguised as concern, about Mrs. Henshaw and Thomas, and that final violent confrontation. Hank listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long time. "Your brother's afraid of you," he said finally. Clara laughed, bitter. "Afraid? Of me?" "Yes. Think about it. You defied him, left on your own terms, built a life without his permission. That terrifies men like him. So he's trying to drag me back to prove he still has power." "Exactly. Which means he's weak, and weakness can be exploited. How? I don't know yet, but there's something there. We just have to find it." It wasn't much, but it was the first thing that had felt like hope all day. Dawson didn't return until well after dark. Clara heard the horse and ran outside, relief flooding through her when she saw him dismount. But one look at his face told her everything. "No one would help," she said. "Not exactly." He walked past her into the house, moving like every step hurt. Some were sympathetic, said they agreed Martin was in the wrong. But when it came to actually standing up in front of a court, making official statements, he shook his head. They all found excuses. They're afraid, Hank said. Of what? Martin's hundreds of miles away. Of being associated with trouble. Of going against the grain. People out here keep their heads down. Getting involved in someone else's legal mess? That's asking for problems. Dawson slumped into a chair. Jim Patterson was the worst. Practically laughed in my face. Said this is what happens when you marry unsuitable women. That I brought this on myself. Clara's chest tightened. I'm sorry. Stop apologizing. His voice was sharp, exhausted. This isn't your fault. It feels like it is. Well, it's not. It's Martin's fault. And everyone in this territory who's too cowardly to do the right thing. They sat in heavy silence. The fire crackled. Outside wind rattled the windows. So what now? Clara asked. I don't know. Dawson looked at her, defeat in his eyes. I'm out of ideas. The admission broke something in her. She'd been holding on to the belief that Dawson would find a way, that his determination would be enough. But he was just a man, capable, yes, but still limited by circumstance and law and geography. They were losing this fight. Maybe I should just go back, she said quietly. No. Cole, if I don't, he'll come here with legal authority. He could take the ranch, arrest you for interfering. Let him try. And then what? You lose everything your mother built? Go to jail? I won't let that happen. I won't let you go back to him. It might not be forever, just long enough to what? Marry Thomas Henshaw? Live under Martin's control? Clara, you know what that life is. You ran from it. I'm not sending you back. You might not have a choice. His fist slammed on the table, making her jump. There's always a choice, even if it's the wrong one, even if it's desperate. There's always a choice. Then tell me what it is, because I don't see one. Neither did he. She could see it in his face, the frustration and helplessness. Hank cleared his throat. There might be one option we haven't considered. They both looked at him. We make Martin come here, Hank said. On our terms, our territory. Force him into a confrontation where we have the advantage. What advantage? Dawson asked. He'll have legal papers, probably a sheriff. But he'll be out of his jurisdiction, in unfamiliar territory. And if we can prove the marriage is legitimate, consummated and recognized by this community, the community won't help us. Not all of them, but some will. We just have to ask the right people. Clara frowned. What do you mean? There are folks who owe Cole favors. People he's helped over the years. Maybe they won't stand up in court, but they'll confirm the marriage is real if asked directly. That's not enough to stop a legal order, Dawson said. No, but it might be enough to create doubt, make Martin's case harder to prove. And if we can delay him long enough, find the right lawyer. We don't have money for a lawyer. Then we find one who'll take the case on principle, or on contingency, or... Hank spread his hands. I don't know. I'm just saying, giving up can't be the first option. Dawson looked at Clara. What do you think? She thought about Martin arriving with legal documents and smug confidence, about being dragged back east like property, about never seeing this ranch, this life, this man again. I think we fight, she said, however we can. Even if it's a long shot? Especially if it's a long shot, because at least then we tried. Something shifted in Dawson's expression. The defeat receded, replaced by determination. All right, he said. Then we fight. They spent the next 2 days preparing. Dawson rode out again, this time to people he'd specifically helped. A rancher whose barn he'd helped rebuild. A widow he'd brought supplies to during a harsh winter. He didn't ask for court testimony, just confirmation that the marriage was real, that Clara lived here as his wife. Most agreed to that much. Clara, meanwhile, worked on making the house look lived in by a married couple. She moved more of her things into Dawson's room, their room now, rearranged furniture to seem more shared, small details that might not matter legally but painted a picture. And at night, she and Dawson talked, really talked, for the first time, about their fears, their hopes, their childhoods, about what they wanted this life to become, if they got the chance. I never thought I'd have this, Dawson admitted one night. A partner, someone to build with. Neither did I. I thought I'd always be alone. You're not alone now. Neither are you. He pulled her closer. I meant what I said before, about not doing this out of desperation. When we, he hesitated. When we take that step, I want it to be right. We might not have time for right. Martin could show up any day. I know, but I don't want our first time to be about him, about legal strategy. I want it to be about us. She understood. But the clock was ticking, and desperation had a way of forcing hands. On the third day, the storm came. Not the Martin kind, actual weather. Dark clouds rolled in from the mountains, temperature dropping fast. By afternoon, rain was sheeting down, wind howling through the gaps in the barn. Dawson and Hank worked frantically to secure everything. Animals inside, equipment covered, loose boards hammered down. Clara helped where she could, getting soaked through, hair plastered to her face. "This is going to be bad," Hank shouted over the wind. "We need to get the cattle down from the upper pasture before it gets worse." "How much worse can it get?" Clara yelled back. As if in answer, thunder cracked so loud it shook the ground. "A lot worse," Dawson said. "Hank, take the east side. I'll go west. Clara, I'm coming with you." "It's too dangerous. I can ride, I can help. We'll cover more ground with 3 people." He looked like he wanted to argue, but another crack of thunder cut him off. "Fine, but you stay close." They saddled up and rode out into the storm. The rain was brutal, visibility near zero, but they pushed on, finding cattle huddled in groups, trying to shelter from the wind. Getting them moving was hard work. The animals were scared, stubborn. Clara's hands went numb on the reins, her body shaking from cold and exertion. But they kept going. Dawson worked with fierce efficiency, directing the cattle toward lower ground, safer shelter. Clara followed his lead, learning as she went. When a calf got separated, she chased it down, herding it back to its mother. Hank appeared from the other direction, bringing another group. Together, they funneled the herd toward the barn and the protected pastures near the house. It took hours. By the time they had all the cattle accounted for, all 3 of them were exhausted, soaked, barely able to feel their fingers. But they'd done it, every animal safe. They stabled the horses and stumbled into the house. Clara's legs nearly gave out crossing the threshold. "Get out of those wet clothes," Dawson said, his own voice shaking from cold. "Both of you, I'll get the fire going." Clara made it to the bedroom, fumbling with buttons that wouldn't cooperate. Her hands were shaking too hard. After a few failed attempts, she gave up and just stood there, dripping on the floor. Dawson found her like that. "Clara? I can't, my hands." He didn't say anything, just stepped forward and started unbuttoning her dress with cold, stiffened fingers. It should have been awkward, intimate, in a way they hadn't navigated yet. But it was just practical, necessary. She did the same for him, helping with his shirt when his hands wouldn't work right. They changed quickly, pulling on dry clothes with mechanical efficiency. Then Dawson wrapped a blanket around her and guided her to the fire Hank had already built up. "That was something," Hank said, holding his own hands to the flames. "Haven't seen a storm hit that fast in years." "Is everything secure?" Clara asked through chattering teeth. "As secure as it's going to be. We'll check for damage in the morning." They sat by the fire, slowly thawing. Clara's body ached in places she didn't know could ache. But underneath the exhaustion was something else. Pride. She'd done that. Ridden into a storm, herded cattle, saved the herd. She'd been useful, capable, strong. Dawson must have seen it in her face because he smiled. "You did good out there." "I just followed your lead." "You did more than that. You kept up, kept going even when it got hard. That's..." He paused. "That's what makes a rancher. Not just the skills, but the refusal to quit." Coming from him, it meant everything. Hank excused himself early, claiming exhaustion. Clara suspected he was giving them privacy. She and Dawson sat by the fire, shoulders touching, watching the flames dance. "I was terrified out there," she admitted. "Me too. But we did it anyway." "That's what you do. You're scared. You do it anyway." She thought about Martin, about the legal threat, about everything they were facing. Is that what we're doing? Being scared, but doing it anyway? Yeah, I think it is. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "I'm glad I'm doing it with you." His arm came around her, solid and warm. "Me too." They sat like that for a long time, just breathing together, letting the warmth seep back into their bones. Eventually, Clara said, "Cole?" "Yeah?" "Earlier, when you said you wanted our first time to be about us." "I remember." I think, she took a breath. I think it already is about us. Everything we do is about us now. The work, the fighting, the way we keep choosing each other over easier paths. That's all us. He pulled back to look at her. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't want to wait for the perfect moment, because we might not get one. And I'd rather have this, us now, imperfect and real, than nothing at all. His eyes searched hers. You're sure? I'm sure. He kissed her then, slow and deep. When they broke apart, he stood and held out his hand. She took it. They went to their room together, and for the first time it felt like theirs. Not his or hers, but shared. What happened next was awkward and tender, fumbling and real. They were both nervous, both inexperienced in different ways. But they worked through it together, learning each other, finding rhythms that belonged only to them. And when it was over, Clara lay in Dawson's arms, feeling more certain of her place in the world than she ever had before. Thank you, she whispered. For what? For seeing me. For wanting me. For making me believe I was worth choosing. His arms tightened around her. You've always been worth choosing. You just needed someone to prove it. She fell asleep like that, safe and wanted. In the morning, the storm had passed. The world was washed clean, sky brilliant blue. They woke tangled together, sunlight streaming through the window. Dawson kissed her forehead. Morning. Morning. How do you feel? She considered. Her body ached from yesterday's work, from last night's intimacy. But underneath that was something solid, unshakable. I feel married, she said. He smiled. Yeah, me too. They rose slowly, neither wanting to break the bubble of peace they'd found. But reality waited. Hank was already up, surveying storm damage. A few shingles blown off the barn, a section of fence down. Nothing catastrophic. We got lucky, he said when they joined him. Could have been a lot worse. They spent the day on repairs, working together with easy efficiency. Clara found herself humming while she worked, a lightness in her chest she couldn't quite explain. Dawson kept catching her eye and smiling. Small moments of recognition, of shared understanding. Everything had changed, and somehow everything was clearer. That afternoon, a rider appeared on the horizon. Clara's heart stopped. But it wasn't Martin, just a boy from town, maybe 15, with a message. Mr. Dawson, I got a telegram for you. Dawson took the paper, read it, face going pale. What is it? Clara asked. He handed it to her. The message was from a lawyer's office in Cheyenne. Brief, professional, devastating. Martin Whitlock has filed a formal petition for recovery of his sister. Hearing scheduled in 2 weeks. Your presence requested. 2 weeks. They had 2 weeks to find a defense, a lawyer, a strategy. It wasn't enough time. But it was all they had. Dawson paid the boy and sent him off. Then he turned to Clara, jaw set. We're going to Cheyenne. Cole? We're going. We'll find a lawyer, make our case, force Martin to face us directly instead of hiding behind legal papers. What if we lose? Then at least we'll have tried everything. He took her hands. I'm not giving you up without a fight. Not now. Not ever. The determination in his voice steadied her. Okay, she said. Then we fight. They started preparing immediately. Hank would stay to watch the ranch. Dawson and Clara would ride to Cheyenne, find a lawyer, prepare their defense. It was a long shot. The odds were stacked against them. But they had something Martin didn't. They had each other. And they had the truth. The marriage was real. The love growing between them was real. And somehow, that had to be enough. The night before they left, Clara stood in the garden she'd rebuilt from nothing. The plants were thriving now, green and alive. Evidence that destroyed things could grow again. Dawson found her there. Having second thoughts? He asked. No, just thinking about how far I've come. From that storage room in Martin's hotel to here, to this life. You built this. The garden, the life, all of it. We built it. Yeah, we did. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, and they stood there watching the sunset paint the sky orange and gold. Tomorrow they'd ride to Cheyenne. They'd face Martin's legal challenge. They'd fight for the right to stay together. But tonight, they had this. The garden, the ranch, each other. And whatever happened, no one could take away what they'd already built. Clara turned in his arms, looking up at him. I love you, The words were out before she could stop them. She hadn't planned to say them, hadn't even fully acknowledged the feeling until it emerged. Dawson went still. What? I love you. I know it's fast. I know we started all wrong, but She took a breath. I love you. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then his face broke into the biggest smile she'd ever seen. I love you too, he said. I have for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it. He kissed her, deep and thorough, and Clara felt something settle into place. This was right. Whatever came next, this was right. They went inside as the last light faded and spent the night wrapped around each other, storing up warmth for the fight ahead. In the morning, they'd ride to Cheyenne. They'd face Martin. They'd fight for their right to this life, this love, this future. And they'd do it together. Because that's what they did. Scared, uncertain, imperfect, but together. Always together. They rode out at dawn, the ranch disappearing behind them as they headed east. Hank stood in the yard, one hand raised in farewell, looking smaller with each mile. Clara had never been to Cheyenne. The journey would take 3 days of hard riding, camping rough, and arriving with barely any time to prepare before the hearing. Dawson had packed light, essentials only. The marriage license, what little money they had saved, and a determination that felt both fragile and unbreakable. The first day passed in tense silence. They stopped only to rest the horses, eating cold food from their saddlebags without really tasting it. Clara's mind kept circling back to the same thought. What if this didn't work? What if they rode all this way just to lose? That night, they made camp near a creek. Dawson built a small fire while Clara unsaddled the horses. The routine was comforting, familiar. It reminded her that whatever happened in Cheyenne, they still had this, the ability to work together, to survive. You're quiet, Dawson said as they sat by the fire. Just thinking. About the hearing? About everything. About how much I have to lose now. She looked at him across the flames. When I left Martin's hotel, I had nothing. No future, no hope. If I lost, I'd just be back where I started. But now, her voice caught. Now I have you, the ranch, a life I actually want. Losing feels so much worse when you have something worth keeping. He moved around the fire to sit beside her. We're not going to lose. You don't know that. No, but I believe it anyway. He took her hand. You know what I think? I think Martin's already lost. Because even if some court says you have to go back, even if they drag you away from here, you're not the same person who ran from him. He can't make you small again. You won't let him. The words settled something in her chest. He was right. She'd changed. The woman who'd cowered in that storage room was gone. In her place was someone who'd rebuilt a garden from nothing, who'd ridden into storms, who'd chosen love even when it was terrifying. Martin could take her body back east, but he couldn't reclaim who she used to be. Thank you, she said. For what? For reminding me who I am. They slept close that night, wrapped in a single bedroll under the stars. Clara listened to Dawson's heartbeat and tried not to think about a future where she couldn't hear it anymore. The second day brought them through rougher country. The landscape changed, more rocks, less grass. They passed a few travelers heading west, exchanged nods but no conversation. Everyone out here understood the value of minding your own business. By afternoon, Clara's body ached from the saddle. She wasn't used to this much riding, but she didn't complain. Dawson was pushing just as hard, and she could see the tension in his shoulders, the worry he was trying to hide. They camped that night near an abandoned homestead, just a collapsed cabin and a well that still held water. While Dawson tended the horses, Clara explored the ruins. It was sad, seeing evidence of someone's failed dream. A rusted pot, a child's toy half buried in dirt. Someone had tried to build a life here and couldn't make it work. She thought about her own life at the ranch, how easily it could have gone the same way. If Dawson had been cruel, if the land had been too harsh, if she'd given up that first week, she'd be just another failed attempt at frontier survival. But she hadn't failed. She'd succeeded, and that was worth fighting for. Dawson found her sitting on what used to be a porch step. You all right? Just thinking about how lucky we are, that we made it work when so many people don't. He sat beside her. It wasn't luck. It was work. Your work. Our work. Yeah, hours. He was quiet for a moment. I keep thinking about what happens if we lose, where you'd go, what you'd do. Don't. I have to. Because if the worst happens, I need you to know I'll come for you, however long it takes, whatever I have to do. I'll come for you. Her throat tightened. Cole, I mean it. Martin can have his legal victory, but he can't keep you, not forever. I'll wait. I'll work. I'll save every penny until I can buy your freedom or steal you back or something. I'll find a way. She believed him. The fierce determination in his voice left no room for doubt. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, she said. Yeah, let's hope. They reached Cheyenne on the third day, just as the sun was setting. The city was bigger than Clara had imagined. Actual streets, buildings more than one story, people everywhere. After months in the isolated ranch, the noise and crowds felt overwhelming. They found a cheap boarding house and took a room. The woman running it looked at them with obvious judgment. Travel-stained clothes, exhausted faces, claiming to be married but with no luggage beyond saddlebags. Clara met her gaze steadily. Let her judge. It didn't matter. That night, they cleaned up as best they could and ventured out to find a lawyer. The first 3 offices they tried were closed. The 4th was open, but the lawyer took one look at them and quoted a retainer fee 3 times what they had. We don't have that kind of money, Dawson said. Then I can't help you. The man's dismissal was casual, practiced. Try the Legal Aid Society, 2 blocks south. The Legal Aid Society was a cramped office above a dry goods store. A young man answered their knock, mid-20s, thin, with ink stains on his fingers and an eager expression that made him look even younger. Can I help you? We need a lawyer, Dawson said. We have a hearing tomorrow and no representation. The young man's eyes widened. Tomorrow? That's not much time. We know, but we're desperate. He ushered them inside. The office was chaos, papers everywhere, books stacked in precarious towers, a cat sleeping on the only clear chair. I'm Samuel Chen, he said, moving the cat. I work with the Legal Aid Society. We help people who can't afford regular lawyers. He gestured for them to sit. Tell me everything. They did. Clara found herself spilling the whole story. Martin, the forced marriage arrangement, her escape, meeting Dawson, the guardianship claim. Samuel listened, taking notes, asking occasional questions. When they finished, he sat back. This is complicated. Can you help us? Clara asked. I can try. But I need to be honest. Guardianship law favors the guardian, especially when the guardian is a male relative and the ward is an unmarried woman. He saw Clara's face. You said you're married now, which helps, but your brother is arguing the marriage isn't valid, and he has some legal ground to stand on. What ground? Dawson's voice was tight. You married without her guardian's permission. In some territories, that's enough to void the marriage. The court will have to decide if Wyoming recognizes the marriage as legitimate or if your brother's guardianship claim supersedes it. So what do we do? Samuel thought for a moment. We prove the marriage is real and that Clara is capable of making her own decisions. We show the court that your brother's guardianship claim is about control, not protection. And we argue that Wyoming territorial law should recognize Clara's right to self-determination. Will that work? Honestly, I don't know, but it's our best shot. He started gathering papers. I'll need to prepare tonight. Can you meet me at the courthouse at 8 tomorrow morning? They agreed and left. Walking back to the boarding house, Clara felt the weight of it all pressing down. He's young, she said. So are we. He's inexperienced. He's what we have, and he seems smart. Clara wanted to believe that was enough. But looking at the nice buildings around them, thinking about Martin arriving with his expensive lawyers and official documents, it felt like bringing a knife to a gunfight. That night, she barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Martin's face, heard Mrs. Henshaw's voice, felt the smallness of that storage room closing in. Dawson held her, but even his warmth couldn't stop the nightmares. Morning came too fast. They dressed in their best clothes, which weren't very good, and met Samuel at the courthouse. He looked like he hadn't slept either, eyes red-rimmed, arms full of law books. I've been researching all night, he said. I think I found a precedent that might help. A case from Montana where... He stopped, looking past them. Is that your brother? Clara turned. Martin stood at the courthouse entrance, looking exactly as she remembered. Well-dressed, confident, with that expression of controlled irritation he wore when dealing with inconvenience. Beside him was an older man in an expensive suit, his lawyer clearly, and behind them, Thomas Henshaw, looking uncomfortable in formal clothes. Clara's stomach dropped. She'd known she'd have to see Martin, but the reality of it was worse than she'd imagined. Martin's eyes found her. For a moment, his expression flickered, surprise maybe at how different she looked. Then it hardened into familiar disapproval. "Clara," he said, walking over. His voice was pleasant, concerned. "I'm so glad you're safe. When you disappeared, I was worried sick." The lie was so blatant, it almost made her laugh. "Were you?" "Of course. You're my sister, family." He glanced at Dawson with obvious disdain. "This man hasn't hurt you, has he?" "This man is my husband." "Husband." Martin said it like a dirty word. "Clara, you're not well. You ran away in a state of distress, made rash decisions. But it's all right. I'm here to help." The condescension in his tone was like a slap. This was Martin's strategy: paint her as incompetent, irrational, someone who needed his protection. Dawson stepped forward. "She doesn't need your help. She needs you to leave her alone." Martin's lawyer intervened smoothly. "Mr. Dawson, I'm Robert Preston, representing Mr. Whitlock. Perhaps we can discuss this civilly." "There's nothing to discuss. Clara is my wife, legally married. That ends her brother's guardianship." "That's for the court to decide," Preston said. "Shall we go inside?" The courtroom was smaller than Clara expected. Plain wooden benches, a judge's bench at the front, windows letting in morning light. A handful of people sat in the gallery, curious locals probably, drawn by the unusual case. They took their seats. Martin and his team on one side, Clara and Dawson with Samuel on the other. The physical distance felt symbolic. The judge entered, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that gave nothing away. Clara's heart leapt. A female judge might understand, might see through Martin's act, or she might judge Clara for not fitting into proper feminine roles. "This is a hearing regarding guardianship and marriage validity," the judge said. "Mr. Preston, you may present your case." Preston stood, every inch the professional lawyer. He laid out Martin's claim with devastating clarity. Clara was 27, had been living under her brother's care, had no independent means. She'd fled in a state of mental distress and entered into a hasty marriage without proper consent. The marriage should be annulled. Clara returned to her guardian's care where she could receive appropriate supervision. He made it sound so reasonable, like Martin was the concerned brother, Clara the troubled sister who needed saving. When Preston finished, the judge turned to Samuel. "Counselor?" Samuel stood. He looked nervous but determined. "Your Honor, this case isn't about guardianship. It's about autonomy. Clara Dawson, and yes, that's her legal name now, is an adult woman capable of making her own decisions. She left her brother's household because he was abusive. She married Mr. Dawson in a legitimate ceremony. She's built a life as a rancher's wife, contributing meaningfully to their homestead. The guardianship claim is simply an attempt by her brother to reassert control he never should have had." "Can you prove abuse?" the judge asked. Clara's breath caught. This was it. "Clara can testify to it, Your Honor." The judge looked at her. "Mrs. Dawson, you're willing to testify under oath about your brother's treatment?" Clara stood on shaking legs. "Yes, Your Honor." "Approach." She walked to the witness stand, placed her hand on the Bible, and swore to tell the truth. Then she sat, facing the courtroom, Martin's eyes boring into her. Samuel approached gently. "Mrs. Dawson, can you describe your living situation at your brother's hotel?" She took a breath. "I lived in a storage room. I worked as unpaid labor, cooking, cleaning, serving guests. My brother provided room and board, but no wages, no freedom to leave." "Did he ever physically harm you?" "Yes. The day I left, he struck me twice, hard enough to draw blood." Murmurs from the gallery. Martin's face remained impassive, but she saw his jaw tighten. "Why did he hit you?" "Because I refused to marry Thomas Henshaw." Samuel turned to the gallery where Thomas sat, looking miserable. "The same Thomas Henshaw who's here today supporting your brother's petition?" "Yes." "And you didn't want to marry Mr. Henshaw?" "No. He drinks excessively and has no stable employment. But my brother had arranged it anyway, without my consent." Preston stood. Objection. This is character assassination of my client's associate. The judge looked thoughtful. I'll allow it. It speaks to motive. Continue, Mrs. Dawson. Clara's hands gripped the armrests. My brother told me I had to marry Thomas or leave with nothing. When I refused, when I stood up for myself for the first time in years, he hit me. Then he tried to force me to apologize, to accept the marriage. I ran instead. And how did you end up in Wyoming? A man at the train station offered me placement as a mail-order bride. I took it because it was my only option. You married Mr. Dawson out of desperation? At first, yes. But it became real. We built a life together, a real marriage, a real partnership. She looked at Dawson, drawing strength from his steady gaze. I'm happy now. For the first time in my life, I'm actually happy. Samuel nodded. Thank you. Your witness, Mr. Preston. Preston approached like a predator. Mrs. Dawson, or should I say Miss Whitlock, since we're disputing the marriage's validity, you claim your brother abused you, yet you lived with him for years without complaint. I complained. He didn't listen. You had opportunities to leave. Other relatives, friends, employment elsewhere. Why didn't you take them? I had no money, no references, nowhere to go. Or perhaps you were comfortable. Free room and board, minimal responsibilities. It sounds quite generous, actually. Clara's temper flared. Generous? I worked 16-hour days. I had no privacy, no freedom, no life of my own. But you were fed, sheltered, protected. I was trapped. Trapped? Or simply unwilling to make your own way? Preston's smile was sharp. You admit you married Mr. Dawson out of desperation. You had no other options. Doesn't that suggest you're not capable of independent decision-making? It suggests I was in a difficult situation and made the best choice I could. A choice that conveniently removed you from your brother's authority and placed you in another man's household. You simply traded one form of dependence for another. The words stung because there was a grain of truth to them. She had been desperate. She had needed help. But that didn't make her incapable. I didn't trade dependence for dependence, Clara said, voice steady. I traded control for partnership. Cole doesn't own me. He respects me. We work together, decide together. That's not dependence, that's marriage. Preston switched tactics. This marriage was awfully quick. You knew Mr. Dawson how long before marrying him? A week. Gasps from the gallery. Preston smiled. A week? And in that week, you decided he was suitable for marriage? I decided he was decent, honest, someone I could build a life with, or someone who could provide shelter when you had nowhere else to go. Both can be true. Indeed. And now that your brother has found you, offered to bring you home, provide for you properly, you're refusing out of stubbornness? I'm refusing because I don't want to go back, because I have a home already, a real one. Preston looked at the judge. Your Honor, this woman clearly makes impulsive decisions driven by emotion rather than reason. Her own testimony proves she's not capable of managing her own affairs. Her brother's guardianship is not only legal, but necessary for her protection. He sat down, looking satisfied. Samuel stood for redirect. Mrs. Dawson, you've built a life in Wyoming. Can you describe your daily work? Clara straightened. I manage the household. Cook, clean, maintain the garden. I also help with ranch work, feeding animals, basic veterinary care, fence repair. During the recent storm, I helped move the entire cattle herd to safety. You did physical ranch work, livestock management? Yes, it's hard work, but I'm capable of it. Does Mr. Dawson force you to do this work? No. I choose to, because it's my ranch too, my life. Samuel pulled out a paper. Your Honor, I have a signed statement from Henry Morrison, a ranch hand employed by the Dawsons. He testifies that Mrs. Dawson is a skilled and dedicated worker, that the marriage appears genuine and loving, and that she's an integral part of the ranch's operation. He handed it to the judge, who read it carefully. I also have statements from neighbors who've traded with the Dawsons, all confirming the marriage appears legitimate and that Mrs. Dawson is respected in the community. Preston stood. Objection. These statements are from people who benefit from maintaining good relations with Mr. Dawson. They're hardly objective. They're evidence of Mrs. Dawson's integration into her community, Samuel countered. Evidence she's built a real life, not run away to nothing. The judge held up a hand. I'll consider all evidence presented, Anything else? Samuel hesitated, then said, Your Honor, I'd like to call Cole Dawson to the stand. Dawson looked surprised but stood. He took the oath and sat, looking uncomfortable in the formal setting. Samuel approached. Mr. Dawson, why did you agree to marry a mail-order bride? I needed help with the ranch. It's too much for one person. So it was a business arrangement? At first, but it became more. When did it become more? Dawson's eyes found Clara's. Gradually. She worked harder than anyone I'd ever seen. She rebuilt my mother's garden from nothing. She didn't complain, didn't give up. She made the house feel like a home again. His voice softened. She made me remember what it's like to have someone to care about. Do you love your wife, Mr. Dawson? Yes, I do. And does she love you? She says she does. I believe her. If the court annuls this marriage, what will you do? Dawson's jaw set. I'll fight it. I'll appeal. I'll find another lawyer. I'll do whatever it takes. Clara's my wife. I'm not giving her up. Preston cross-examined, trying to paint Dawson as opportunistic, as someone who'd taken advantage of Clara's vulnerability. But Dawson's steady, honest answers deflected every attack. Finally, the judge called for closing arguments. Preston went first, reiterating his points about Clara's instability, the rushed marriage, Martin's legitimate guardianship rights. Then Samuel stood. He looked at Clara, at Dawson, then at the judge. Your Honor, this case is about one question. Who gets to decide how Clara lives her life? Her brother, who wants to control her? Or Clara herself? He paced, warming to his theme. Mr. Whitlock claims he's protecting his sister, but protection doesn't look like hitting someone. It doesn't look like forcing unwanted marriages. Real protection means giving someone the tools to protect themselves. He turned to Clara. Mrs. Dawson has those tools now. She has skills, independence, a partner who respects her. She's not perfect. None of us are. She made a quick decision to marry Mr. Dawson. Maybe it was hasty, but it was her decision, and it worked out. She's thriving. The law recognizes marriage as a valid end to guardianship. Clara's marriage is legal under Wyoming law. It was properly executed, properly documented. Mr. Whitlock's objection is based on a technicality about permission that adult women shouldn't need to live their own lives. Samuel's voice grew stronger. Your Honor, if you rule in Mr. Whitlock's favor, you're saying women are property, that their brothers get to decide their futures regardless of what they want. But if you rule for Mrs. Dawson, you're saying something different. You're saying women have the right to choose their own paths, even if those paths are unconventional, even if they make mistakes along the way. He sat down. The courtroom was silent. The judge looked at her notes for a long moment. Then she looked up. This is a difficult case. The law on guardianship is clear. Relatives can maintain legal authority over unmarried female family members under certain circumstances. However, the law on marriage is equally clear. A valid marriage ends that authority. Clara held her breath. The question before me is whether Mrs. Dawson's marriage is valid. Mr. Preston argues it's not, due to lack of guardian consent. But Wyoming territorial law doesn't require guardian consent for adult women to marry. It requires only that both parties enter the marriage willingly and that proper procedures are followed. The judge picked up the marriage license. This license was properly executed. Both parties signed. A witness confirmed. It meets all legal requirements. Hope flickered in Clara's chest. However, Mr. Whitlock raises concerns about his sister's mental state at the time of marriage. If Mrs. Dawson was not of sound mind when she married, the marriage could be voidable. The hope dimmed. I've heard testimony from both sides. Mrs. Dawson strikes me as articulate and capable. Her decision to flee an abusive situation and seek better circumstances shows sound judgment, not impairment. Her work on the ranch demonstrates competence. Her testimony shows clear understanding of her choices and their consequences. The judge paused. Mr. Whitlock, on the other hand, has shown no evidence of genuine concern for his sister's welfare. His actions, attempting to force an unwanted marriage, physically striking her, pursuing her across territories to reclaim authority, suggest his interest is control, not protection. Martin's face reddened. Therefore, I rule that Clara Dawson's marriage to Cole Dawson is valid and legally binding. Mr. Whitlock's guardianship claim is denied. Mrs. Dawson is free to return to Wyoming with her husband. The gavel came down. Clara couldn't breathe, couldn't process it. They'd won. She'd won. Dawson pulled her into his arms, and she finally let herself cry. Relief, joy, overwhelming gratitude, it all poured out. Samuel was grinning. We did it. We actually did it. Across the aisle, Martin stood, face purple with rage. This is outrageous. I'll appeal. You can try, the judge said coolly, but I'm confident this ruling will stand. Mrs. Dawson has demonstrated her capacity for self-determination. The court will not overturn a valid marriage to satisfy your need for control. We're adjourned. She left the bench. Martin stormed out, Preston following with his briefcase. Thomas Henshaw slipped away without a word. Clara turned to Samuel. Thank you. I don't know how to repay you. You don't have to. This is why I do this work. He shook both their hands. Go home. Live your life. Be happy. They would. Outside the courthouse, the sun was shining. Clara stood on the steps, feeling the warmth on her face, and let herself believe it was over. She was free. Dawson took her hand. Ready to go home? More than ready. They collected their horses and started the long ride back. But this time, the journey felt different, lighter. Every mile west was a mile toward their life, their future. They camped that night in the same spot they'd used on the way east, but the fear was gone, replaced by cautious joy. I keep thinking I'll wake up and it'll have been a dream, Claire said, lying in Dawson's arms. It's real. We won. We did, didn't we? She laughed, slightly giddy. Martin can't touch me anymore. Never again. She rolled to face him. What do we do now? We go home, work the ranch, live our lives. Just like that? Just like that? He kissed her forehead. Maybe we expand the garden, get more chickens. In a few years, think about building an addition to the house. An addition? For when we need more space. For kids, maybe. If that's something you want. Clara's breath caught. She'd never let herself imagine that. A family of her own. Children who'd grow up knowing they were wanted. I'd like that, she whispered. Someday. Someday, he agreed. They rode into the ranch 3 days later, exhausted and filthy and happier than either had ever been. Hank came running out. Well, we won, Dawson said. Hank whooped, actually lifting Clara off her horse in a spinning hug. I knew it. I knew you two would pull it off. It was close, Clara said, laughing. Too close. But you won. That's what matters. They celebrated that night with the last of Dawson's father's whiskey. Hank told stories. Dawson relaxed in a way Clara had never seen, and she felt pieces of herself settling into place. This was her life now. This ranch, these people, this hard, beautiful land. She'd fought for it, earned it, and now it was hers. The next morning, Clara woke early and went to the garden. The plants had grown while she was gone, vegetables ripening, flowers blooming. She knelt in the dirt, pulling a few weeds, checking for pests. This was where it had started, really, her transformation. In this garden, rebuilding life from dead soil, she'd learned she could create instead of just survive. Dawson found her there an hour later. You're up early. Couldn't sleep, too much to think about. He knelt beside her. Good thoughts or bad? Good. Mostly. She sat back on her heels. I keep thinking about what Samuel said, about how I'm not perfect, but I'm choosing my own path. You are. I've spent so much of my life trying to be what other people wanted. Small enough, quiet enough, acceptable enough. I failed at all of it. Good. She smiled. Yeah, good. Because trying to be someone else's version of acceptable, that's not living. That's just slow disappearing. And now I'm done disappearing. She looked at the garden, the ranch, the mountains beyond. I'm here. Fully, completely here. And I'm not apologizing for it anymore. Dawson pulled her close. I wouldn't want you any other way. They sat there together, dirt under their nails, sun warming their backs. A year ago, Clara had been trapped in a storage room, believing she was nothing. Now she was kneeling in a garden she'd built, married to a man who saw her strength, living a life she'd chosen. It wasn't a fairy tale. There would be hard days ahead, brutal winters, failed crops, the endless work of keeping a ranch alive. They'd fight sometimes, frustrate each other, struggle with money and uncertainty. But they'd do it together. As partners. As equals. That was worth everything. Over the following months, life settled into new rhythms. The garden produced more than they needed, so Clara started trading vegetables with neighbors. Slowly, cautiously, relationships with the community began to thaw. Not everyone warmed to them. Jim Patterson and his crowd stayed hostile, but enough people came around that they weren't completely isolated anymore. Mrs. Fletcher even stopped by one day, ostensibly to borrow sugar. She looked at the flourishing garden, the well-kept house, Clara's confident bearing, and something in her expression shifted. "You've done well here," she said grudgingly. "Thank you. I may have been hasty in my judgment before." It wasn't quite an apology, but Clara accepted it as close as she'd get. "We all make mistakes." Mrs. Fletcher left, looking thoughtful. That winter was harsh, but they'd prepared well. The house stayed warm, the animals survived, and Clara learned that she was stronger than cold and hardship. Spring came eventually, as it always did. Clara planted the garden again, this time with Dawson's help. They worked side by side, planning what to grow, where to expand. "I was thinking," Dawson said one afternoon, hands deep in soil, "we should get a few fruit trees, apples maybe, or pears. That would take years to produce fruit." "So? We've got years." He looked at her. "Don't we?" Clara smiled. "Yeah, we do." They planted the trees that week. Young saplings that would take 5 years or more to bear fruit. It was an act of faith, faith in the future, in their ability to stay, to build something lasting. That summer, Clara discovered she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks but hadn't said anything, too afraid to hope. When she finally told Dawson, he stared at her for a long moment, then picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "We're having a baby? We're having a baby." His joy was infectious. They told Hank that evening, and he immediately started planning additions to the house, talking about cribs and baby rooms with endearing enthusiasm. Clara let herself imagine it, a child running through this house, playing in the garden, learning to ride horses. A child who would grow up knowing they were wanted, loved, free to be whoever they became. The pregnancy wasn't easy. Morning sickness hit hard, and the physical work of the ranch became more challenging as she grew. But Dawson and Hank adjusted, taking over her heavier tasks, making sure she rested. She hated being unable to do everything she used to, but she also learned to accept help, to let others care for her without feeling weak. That was growth too. Their daughter was born on a cold November night, with a midwife from town and Dawson pacing outside. When the baby's cry finally broke the silence, he rushed in, and Clara saw tears on his face. "She's perfect," he whispered, holding their daughter with careful reverence. "What should we name her?" They'd discussed it before. Dawson had suggested Clara choose, since he'd named nothing in his life that mattered this much. Clara looked at the tiny face, already so fierce, so alive. She thought about her own mother, who'd died giving her life, about Dawson's mother, who'd worked herself to death for this ranch. "Grace," she said, "for the grace we've been given. The second chances. Grace Dawson." Dawson smiled. "It's perfect." Raising a child while running a ranch was exhausting. There were nights Clara got no sleep, days she functioned on pure determination. But there were also moments of pure joy. Grace's first smile, her first laugh, watching Dawson sing to her off-key while rocking her to sleep. The community's attitude shifted further after Grace was born. Having a baby made them more respectable somehow, more normal. People who'd shunned them before now stopped to coo over the baby, offer advice, bring small gifts. Clara accepted it all with grace, understanding that people needed time to adjust their prejudices. She didn't forget who'd stood by them and who hadn't. But she didn't hold grudges either. Life was too short for that. Grace grew fast, rolling over, then crawling, then walking before she was a year old. She was fearless, climbing everything, exploring with enthusiastic chaos. Clara watched her daughter navigate the world with such confidence and felt something heal inside her. This child would never know what it was like to feel unwanted. She'd grow up knowing she could be loud, take up space, be fully herself. That was the gift Clara and Dawson could give her. Years passed. The ranch prospered modestly, never wealthy, but stable. The fruit trees they'd planted began producing. Grace grew into a wild, happy child who could ride before she could read properly and preferred helping Hank with horses to any indoor activity. Clara's garden became known throughout the county. People came to trade for her vegetables, her herbs, The flower seeds she'd learned to save and cultivate. She wasn't the woman who'd arrived on that train anymore. She was taller, somehow, not physically, but in presence. She walked through town with her head up. She spoke at community meetings. She took up space without apology, and people respected her for it. Dawson changed too. The hard edges softened. He smiled more, laughed easier. The loneliness that had defined him for years melted away, replaced by contentment. They fought sometimes, about money, about how to handle Grace's increasing wildness, about whether to expand the ranch or stay small. But they fought fair, worked through it, came out stronger. That was marriage. Not perfection, but persistence. On their 5th anniversary, they stood in the garden together, watching Grace chase chickens while the sun set. "You ever regret it?" Dawson asked. "Marrying me, taking this gamble?" Clara looked at him, this man who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen her anyway, who'd fought for her, believed in her, loved her even when she couldn't love herself. "Not for a second," she said. "You?" "Best decision I ever made." He kissed her, and Grace made exaggerated gagging sounds, making them both laugh. This was the life Clara had built. Not the one she'd been told to want, not the one anyone expected, but hers. Earned through courage and stubbornness and refusing to disappear. She'd been the girl no one wanted, the burden, the inconvenience. Now she was Clara Dawson, rancher, wife, mother, gardener. A woman who'd learned that being unwanted by the wrong people was sometimes the greatest gift, because it forced you to become the right person for yourself. She looked at her daughter, at her husband, at the land stretching endlessly around them. She thought about the storage room, about Martin's hotel, about the frightened woman who'd boarded that train west. That woman had been so sure she was nothing. She'd been wrong. Everyone who'd told Clara she wasn't enough had been wrong. And proving them wrong, living fully, loudly, unapologetically, that was the greatest victory of all. The sun dipped below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Grace ran to Clara, demanding to be picked up, and Dawson's arm came around them both. This was home. This was family. This was everything Clara had never dared to dream she deserved, and she'd fought for every bit of it. As darkness fell and stars began to emerge, Clara Dawson stood in her garden, surrounded by the life she'd chosen, and felt completely, utterly, triumphantly free.